Maya entered Dante's office at 3 in the afternoon with a folder of documents he had requested that morning, moving with excessive caution that she thought she was trying to hide but wasn't. Each step measured as if her body ached in places it shouldn't. Her breathing shallow as if breathing deeply caused pain in ribs that were possibly bruised or broken. And she kept her head down as she always did, her hair falling forward covering her face because she had learned in the last 6 months, working as Dante Moretti's personal assistant, that invisibility was protection. That the less he noticed her, the safer she was. Except that today invisibility was impossible, because when she put the folder on the table and turned to leave quickly, her blouse sleeve slipped up, revealing her forearm, and Dante saw it. She saw purple and yellow finger-shaped marks, unmistakable evidence of someone having grabbed her wrist with brutal force, saw what she was trying to hide under long-sleeved clothes, even though it was a sweltering summer. And the sound he made was something between a growl and a strangled word. A sound that made Maya freeze completely because she recognized the tone. Recognized danger in it, knew she had just revealed something that should have remained hidden, and now consequences were coming. And she didn't know if they would be directed at her or the cause of the injuries, but either way terror rose in her throat, making it impossible to breathe properly. "Stop," Dante said, his voice so low it was almost a whisper, yet it carried an absolute command that allowed no disobedience. "Turn around. Look at me. Now." Maya obeyed because what choice did she have? She turned slowly, forcing herself to lift her head, even though every instinct screamed at her to shrink, to disappear, to not draw any more attention to herself. And when her eyes finally met his, she saw something she hadn't expected. She didn't see anger directed at her, as she had anticipated. She saw fury. Yes, but also horror. Also something that seemed dangerously close to pain, to worry, to emotions that a boss shouldn't feel for an administrative assistant who was just another employee in an empire that employed hundreds. "Lift your sleeve," Dante ordered, already rising from his chair, already walking around the table toward her. "The whole sleeve. Let me see completely." And when Maya hesitated, when her hands trembled, trying to decide whether to obey or lie or run, Dante stopped a meter from her and repeated more gently, but no less firmly, "Maya, please, I need to see. I need to know how much damage was done. I need to know," he paused as if his next words would cost him anything, "I need to know who did this to you so I can make them regret every second they existed." Maya pulled up her sleeve, revealing not only marks on her wrist, but also bruises climbing up her forearm. A pattern that suggested a struggle, suggested someone holding her against her will while she tried to break free, and she saw Dante's face change. Saw the control he always maintained begin to crack at the edges. Saw his hands clench into fists so tight that the knuckles turned white. Saw his jaw tighten so that muscles bulged. Saw his eyes darken from dark brown to almost black, with a fury that was being contained only by willpower and concern for not scaring her more, as she was already obviously terrified. "There's more," Dante said, not a question yet, but an observation, because obviously he could see from the way she was moving that the damage wasn't limited to her arms. "Show me, please, Maya. Trust me enough to let me see." And something in his voice, in the vulnerability in that request, in the way he said please as if he were begging, not ordering, made Maya's defenses crumble just minimally, just enough for her to murmur, "Ribs. I think they're cracked." And there she touched the side of her face that she was wearing makeup to cover. "There's more here too." Dante closed. His eyes for a moment breathed deeply as if trying to control himself, trying not to explode in premature violence before knowing all the facts. And when he opened his eyes again, there was decisiveness there. There was determination that Maya recognized as his trademark. The same determination he used when negotiating impossible deals or eliminating threats to the Empire. Except now it was being directed not towards expanding power but towards protecting, towards revenge, towards making whoever hurt her pay a price that would be measured not in money, but in pain. "Sit down," he said, indicating a sofa in the corner of the office, "and tell me everything. Who it was, why, when, every detail, because I'll need every detail to do what needs to be done." "And Maya," he said when she hesitated again, "you're not in danger with me. You never were. Any fear you have of me, any reason that makes you hide your injuries and avoid looking at me, you can put that aside now because I protect what is. Mine and you." He paused, as if acknowledging the truth he was about to declare. "You are mine. You have been since the first day you started working here. So let me do what I do best. Let me eliminate the threat. Maya sat down because her legs were no longer supporting her properly, because terror, relief, and confusion were battling for dominance and leaving her dizzy, because Dante's words, "You are mine," were echoing in her mind in ways that made sense, and also made no sense because she was just an assistant, just an employee. Why would she be his in any sense that mattered beyond the professional? But she began to tell because not telling would mean Trevor would win, would mean the abuse would continue, would mean the bruises would become permanent, or worse, would become an obituary. "He's my ex-boyfriend," she said, her voice small and broken. "Trevor. We dated for 2 years before I started working here. He was," she searched for words, "he was controlling, jealous. He'd get angry when I went out without him, when I talked to other men, when I didn't answer messages right away. But he wasn't violent until," she swallowed, "until I got this job, until I started working for you." She looked at Dante, saw him processing information with an expression that promised future violence. "He said I was cheating on him, that no normal boss needed an assistant staying late, that you obviously wanted more than work from me. And when I tried to break up with him 3 days ago, because I couldn't handle the accusations and control anymore, she touched her ribs delicately. "He showed me exactly what he thought about decision-making. 3 days," Dante repeated, his voice dangerously calm. "This happened 3 days ago, and you kept coming to work, kept smiling and acting like nothing happened, kept hiding it. Why, Maya? Why didn't you come to me right away? Why didn't you let me deal with it before I had to suffer for 3 days?" Maya looked at her hands in her lap, unable to maintain eye contact. "Because I didn't think you'd care," she admitted. "Because I'm just an employee. Because personal problems are personal problems and shouldn't be brought to work. Because," she finally looked up, "because I'm afraid of you too. Not in the same way I'm afraid of Trevor, but you Dante Moretti. A man people whisper about with terror. Why would you care about an injured assistant when you have an empire to run?" Dante knelt in front of her. Movement that brought him to her eye level, making his posture less intimidating even though his presence remained powerful. He reached out, hesitating only a fraction of a second before gently touching her chin, turning her face to capture better light. She saw him see for the first time the bruise hidden beneath thick makeup, something within him shattering completely as he realized Trevor had struck her face, leaving a visible mark of violence. The sound Dante made was one of pure fury, a promise of brutal and absolute retribution. "I'm going to kill him," Dante said simply. Not as a threat, but as a stated fact, as an inevitability already decided. "I'm going to find him, and I'm going to make him beg for death before he grants it. I'm going to make sure that every bruise on you is returned in pain, magnified 1,000 times over." "I will," Maya interrupted, placing her hand over his, which was still touching her face. "No," she said, her voice firm despite the fear. "I don't want you to kill for me. I don't want blood on my hands because of a mistake I made choosing the wrong boyfriend. Just make him stop. Make him leave me alone. Make him understand that he can't touch me again. That's all I need." Dante studied her for a long moment, an obvious internal struggle in his eyes between doing what she asked and doing what his instincts demanded, and finally nodded once, reluctantly accepting. "I won't kill him," he agreed. "But Maya, he needs to understand. Consequences. He needs to understand that touching you has a price, so I'm going to hurt him. I'm going to hurt him badly enough that he'll never forget, that he'll never consider raising a hand to another woman, that he'll live with physical reminders every time he looks in the mirror. Can he accept that? Can he live knowing that I ordered violence in his name, even though he didn't ask for it?" Maya thought about the alternative, about Trevor coming after her again, about the cycle of abuse, continuing, about the next time that might not just result in broken ribs, but something permanent, something fatal, and she nodded. "I can live with that," she said. "As long as he leaves me alone, as long as I never have to be afraid of him again, I can live knowing that you hurt him." "Good," Dante said, standing up, already pulling out his phone, already making calls that would set the plan in motion. "Because he's going to learn today that touching you is declaring war on me, and wars against me never end well for the other side." He spoke rapidly in Italian, instructions given in a tone that allowed no room for error, and Maya heard Trevor's name being mentioned, heard an address being given, an address she hadn't shared. But obviously Dante had the resources to find out anything about anyone when motivated enough. The call ended, and Dante turned his attention to her. "You stay here," he said. The doctor's coming to examine your ribs to make sure there's no internal damage. And then, he paused, then you're going to my private apartment. Don't go back to your place tonight. Not until I'm sure Trevor understood the message that he won't try to retaliate. Your apartment, Maya repeated, processing the implication. Why? Why not just a hotel or... Because I need to know you're safe, Dante interrupted. Because my apartment has security that hotels don't. Because it's in the same building, so I can personally check that you're okay. Because... He hesitated. Because the idea of you being alone somewhere, I can't reach quickly if he tries something as unacceptable to me. And before you ask why again, before you question why I care so much, I'm going to be honest in a way I haven't been before. Because timing never seemed right. But timing is irrelevant now because you're hurt, and you deserve to know. He sat beside her on the sofa, turning to face her completely. I'm in love with you, Dante said, the words coming out like a confession, an admission of weakness that a man like him rarely allowed. I've been in love since about the second month you started working here, since the moment you joked about my terrible taste in coffee and laughed when I rolled my eyes, since the first time I really saw you, not just as an employee, but as an intelligent, funny, and kind person in ways that no one in my world is kind. I kept my distance because I didn't want to make you uncomfortable, because power dynamics are complicated, because men in my world shouldn't have weaknesses, and you would be the biggest weakness possible. But the secret is over now because Trevor hurt you, and that broke me in ways I can't pretend about. And you deserve to know that you're not just an employee. You never were just an employee. It's been obsession and desire and love that I tried to deny, but I can't anymore. Maya stared at him, her mouth slightly open in shock because of all the things she expected today, of all the possible developments. A confession of love from Dante. Moretti wasn't even remotely on the list of possibilities. You are, she tried to process. You're telling me you love me? For how long? Why didn't you ever say anything? Dante smiled, a sad expression on his face. 6 months, he said. And I never said anything because what right did I have? You were in a relationship, you were stuck with an abusive man, but I didn't know that, so I just thought you were happy with someone else. And even after you broke up, how could I get close? I'm a criminal, Maya, a dangerous man who lives in a violent world. I'm not a viable romantic option for a woman like you who deserves normalcy and security, but you're offering protection now, Maya pointed out. Her mind still spinning, trying to reconcile intimidating boss Dante with passionate man Dante. You're taking me to your apartment. You're going after Trevor. You're taking care of me in ways a real boyfriend never did. So maybe you're more viable than you think. Maybe danger isn't a problem if danger is directed toward protecting, not hurting. She touched his face. A bold move for her, but she felt the boldness was deserved, felt that 6 months of unacknowledged tension deserved to be confronted. And maybe, she said softly, maybe I feel something too. It's not as obvious as love yet, because I'm coming out of a bad relationship, and my heart is hurting literally and figuratively. But there's something. It's always been something every time you look at me, every time you get too close and don't move away, every time you say my name in a way that makes strange things happen in my stomach. Then let me court you properly, Dante said, covering her hand with his. Let me show you how a man should treat a woman he loves. Let me prove I can be more than a boss, more than a criminal. I can be a partner who protects and respects and adores in a way Trevor never was able to. You don't need to decide now. You don't need to feel pressure, just let me try. And Maya nodded, because what other answer was there when the most powerful man she knew had just declared his love while also planning to make her abusive ex-boyfriend pay for violence when protection and revenge and romance were mixing in complicated but also undeniably sincere ways. The doctor arrived 30 minutes later, examined Maya gently but thoroughly, confirmed that her ribs were cracked but not broken, which was marginally better, that the bruises looked worse than they were, and would heal completely in weeks, that there were no signs of internal damage, but she should rest and avoid physical exertion and monitor symptoms. Dante listened to every word as if he were receiving a military report, as if Maya's health were a critical mission that could not fail. And when the doctor finished and prescribed painkillers and left care instructions, Dante thanked him generously, promising loyalty and silence because personal doctors of criminals quickly learned that discretion was the most important part of the job. They went to Dante's apartment at the top of the building. a space Maya had never seen before because it was completely private. Personal territory he didn't share with employees, no matter how trusted. And it was surprisingly cozy for a criminal's dwelling. Expensive decor, yes, but also comfortable. Family photographs on the walls suggesting Dante had a history beyond empire. Books on every surface suggesting he read not just for information but for pleasure. A kitchen that looked used suggesting he cooked sometimes. And all of this humanized him in ways his reputation never allowed. Dante showed Maya the guest room where she would be staying, a space larger than her own entire apartment, with a king-size bed, a private bathroom, an empty closet waiting to be filled. He told her she was free to use anything she needed, to make herself at home, that her privacy would be respected, but he would be available if she needed anything. Then he hesitated at the door, as if he wanted to say more but didn't know how, as if his previous confession had exhausted his capacity for vulnerability, and now he was reverting to his familiar mode of control and distance. But before she could leave, before the moment passed, Maya said, "Thank you for believing in me, for protecting me, for," she swallowed back the rising emotion, "for seeing me when I spent 6 months trying to be invisible." Dante returned, closed the distance between them, and gently cupped her face in his hands, a gentleness that contrasted sharply with his reputation for brutality. "You were never invisible to me," he said. "It was impossible not to see, impossible not to notice every detail, impossible not to want more and more as time went on. And now that I know you're hurt, now that I understand what you were hiding, being invisible is no longer an option. You are seen, Maya, completely seen and completely valued and completely protected from this point forward." And then he kissed her, gently, because she was hurt, but passionately because repressed feelings could no longer be contained. And Maya kissed him back, despite her ribs protesting the movement, because this connection with the man who terrified and fascinated her and now declared her love was what she needed. It was a different kind of healing that a doctor couldn't prescribe. It was a promise of a future where she would not be a victim but protected, not isolated but valued, not abused but adored. Meanwhile, in a less glamorous part of town, Trevor was leaving a bar where he'd spent the afternoon getting drunk and complaining to anyone who would listen, about his ungrateful ex-girlfriend who didn't know her place, about how she'd taught him a lesson a few days ago and would probably need to teach him another soon because women like her never learn the first time. And he was stumbling towards his car even though he was completely unable to drive when a black van pulled up beside him and the door slid open and 3 men got out, didn't ask his name, just grabbed him and threw him into the van before he could scream or fight or even process what was happening. Van drove for 20 minutes to an abandoned warehouse in an industrial area where Dante's businesses occasionally needed privacy, where interrogations took place and lessons were taught and messages were sent to those foolish enough to cross lines that shouldn't be crossed, and Trevor was dragged inside and tied to a chair in the center of the empty space, bright lights above, making it impossible to see beyond the immediate circle, making it seem like he was in a vacuum of darkness, with only the chair and captors and growing fear about what was happening. Dante arrived 30 minutes later, having left Maya safely in an apartment with security at the door and instructions not to let anyone in. He had changed from a business suit into darker clothes that wouldn't show blood because he intended to get his hands dirty. Personally, tonight, he intended to make Trevor understand viscerally that consequences were real, painful, and permanent. He entered the circle of light, and Trevor finally saw who had ordered the kidnapping. He finally recognized the face from newspaper photographs, from news investigations, from the paranoid research he had done on Maya's boss when jealousy began to consume his logic. "You are," Trevor began, his voice trembling, "you are Dante Moretti, the boss, the guy Maya." He paused, realizing the implication. "You're her lover. I knew it. Knew there was something between you two. She lied to me about it being just work, but I knew." Dante punched Trevor, a straight punch that broke his nose. Blood spurting immediately, and Trevor screamed in both pain and shock because the reality of violence was different from fantasies about teaching lessons. It was sharper, more real, more terrifying than anything Trevor had inflicted because he beat women smaller than him when he was drunk and furious, but now he was receiving it from a trained, sober, and coldly calculating man about damage. "Never," Dante said, his mortal voice calm, "never was I your lover while I was with you. Maya is loyal in ways that worms like you could never understand. She endured your abuse, your control, your violence, because she thought she loved you, because she thought she could fix you, because women like her are too good for men like you who don't deserve to breathe the same air as them. But not anymore. it's over. You've lost the privilege of even knowing her name, of thinking about her, of existing in the same universe as her because you touched her, he hit her again, and hurt her, hit her again, and left marks again on something that is mine. Trevor was crying now. Blood streaming from his broken nose, pain radiating from places that already hurt and promised to hurt much more before the night was over, and he tried to speak, tried to plead or negotiate or anything to stop it. I didn't know, he managed to say between sobs. I didn't know she meant anything to you. If I knew, I never would have. Dante cut him off with a humorless laugh. Oh, you knew, he said. Maya told you she was over, told you to leave her alone, and you decided violence was the appropriate response. So don't come here now acting like ignorance is an excuse. You made a choice. You chose to hurt her. And now I choose to hurt you. But the difference, he leaned closer, bending down to speak, directly into Trevor's ear, is that, when I'm done, you'll never forget. Every time you look in the mirror, every time you touch the scars, I'll leave. You'll remember that this happened because you didn't know how to value the gift you had. You didn't know how to treat the woman you loved with the respect she deserved. And Dante did exactly what he promised, spending the next hour systematically breaking Trevor in ways that were painful but not fatal, that would leave permanent marks but would allow survival because Maya had asked for no death, and Dante respected her wishes, even when instinct screamed to eliminate him completely. So he contented himself with breaking Trevor's arm and a few fingers, and adding scars that would require plastic surgery to fix, and that Trevor would probably never have the money to pay for. So he would live with physical reminders of his mistake for the rest of his life, which would be lived with much more care from that point on. When it was finally over, when Trevor was semi-conscious and crying and broken in the chair, Dante carefully cleaned himself up, washed the blood from his hands and face, checked that his clothes were relatively clean because he had been careful about angles, and leaned close to Trevor one last time. If I hear you tried to contact Maya, he said, if I hear your name in the context of her, if you even think about her in a way that displeases me, I'll be back. And next time, I won't hold back. Next time, Maya's promise not to kill doesn't apply because you will have proven that you don't learn, that you deserve permanent elimination. Understood? Trevor nodded weakly, all he was capable of, and Dante gestured to his men. Take him to the hospital, drop him in the emergency room, disappear before anyone asks questions. And make sure you understand that if you talk to the police about this, if you try to implicate me in any way, his family pays the price. Mother, father, sister in Connecticut, they all learn that. Protecting Trevor costs more than it's worth. Dante returned to the apartment at 2 a.m, exhausted not physically, but emotionally, because violence always costs something. Even when justified, always left a mark that he felt, even when he didn't show it. And he found Maya still awake in the living room, wearing comfortable clothes that he had provided, reading a book she had taken from her collection. And she looked up when he entered and didn't ask what happened, didn't ask for. Detaeus just studied his face, and apparently saw enough because she got up, walked over to him, ignoring the protest of her ribs, and hugged him. It's done, Dante whispered against her hair. He'll never touch you again. He'll never even say your name again if he's any smart. You're safe now. Safe with me. Thank you, Maya whispered. I know I asked you not to kill, and I appreciate you respecting that. I also know that what he did was probably terrible and brutal, and exactly what he deserved. So, thank you for protecting me in ways no one ever has before. Dante held her tighter, careful of broken ribs, but needing closeness, needing to feel she was safe in his arms, that the violence he committed had served a real purpose, to eliminate a threat, not just satisfy a thirst for revenge. I will always protect you, he promised. Whenever you need me, whenever someone tries to hurt you, I'll be there. Because I love you, Maya. I love you in ways I didn't know I was capable of loving. And men like me, when we love, protect absolutely and completely. The following months were a process of physical and emotional healing. Maya recovering from physical damage while also working through trauma from an abusive relationship with a therapist that Dante insisted on and paid for. Maya gradually understood that healthy love was different from the control Trevor called love. That jealousy wasn't proof of care, but proof of insecurity. That a real partner builds up instead of destroys, supports instead of diminishes, protects instead of hurts. And Dante demonstrated all of this through actions, through patience when she had nightmares, through gentleness when she retreated out of conditioned fear, through respect when she needed space, through constant presence that said without words that he wouldn't leave when things got tough. Trevor never attempted contact, having apparently learned a lesson about the consequences of tampering with Dante Moretti's property, and word spread through appropriate channels that Maya was under absolute protection, that anyone who looked at her the wrong way would answer personally to the boss whose reputation for brutality in defense of those he loved had become legendary. And this created a bubble of security around her that allowed her to live without constant fear for the first time in years. And the love between them grew, beginning as gratitude and attraction, but evolving into something deeper, more genuine, Maya seeing layers of Dante that he hid from the rest of the world, seeing a man who read poetry and cooked dinner and cried during sad movies when he thought he wasn't being watched, seeing human beneath criminal, seeing a capacity for tenderness that coexisted with a capacity for violence, and loving both sides because both were real, both were Dante, and she chose to love the whole of him, not just convenient parts. And Dante discovered that being loved by Maya transformed him, made him not less dangerous, but more selective about when to unleash danger, made him a man who wanted to be better, not for abstract redemption, but because she saw him as good, and he wanted to be worthy of that perception. Because when she looked at him, she saw potential not only in the past. She saw a future where he could be more than a legacy of violence built out of necessity when he was too young to know alternatives. Finally, when Maya finally said, "I love you back," when words flowed naturally one night, while they were having dinner and laughing about something inconsequential, when love had become so obvious that declaring it was just confirming what they both already knew, Dante took her hand across the table and said, "Thank you for letting me see your scars, literal and metaphorical. Thank you for trusting that it wouldn't just be another man who hurts you. Thank you for giving me a chance to be a hero instead of a villain in at least one story." And Maya smiled, freely and genuinely in ways she hadn't smiled in years, and replied, "You've always been a hero in my story. From the moment you saw the marks and decided someone would pay the price, the moment you protected me when you didn't have to, from the moment you proved that love can be fierce and gentle simultaneously, that strong men protect instead of dominate, that saving someone sometimes means being willing to get your hands dirty to keep them clean. And this was the truth they would always carry, that sometimes heroes wear expensive suits stained with villains' blood, that sometimes salvation comes from the darkest places, that sometimes the truest love grows from the soil of violence, when violence is directed to protect, not destroy, when force is used to defend, not control. And that purple mark seen by the right eyes can initiate life-changing transformations, healing old wounds while preventing new ones, proving that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is exactly who you need by your side when the world becomes too threatening to face alone.